The YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram are full of financial advice, often from people, young kids that haven't actually made money, or from people selling a course. They might have made a lot of money, but they're trying to sell you stuff. I'm neither. I'm not trying to sell you anything here. And on top of that, I've made a lot of mistakes. One of the reasons I started this channel, The Sport, was to share my mistakes along the way, from being very poor in Finland, having to wear soccer shoes that were 3 sizes too big from my older brother, and because we couldn't afford 2 pairs of shoes, and to the point where I'm today an ultra high net worth individual, according to whatever the definitions are. During that way, I didn't have financial advice. I later had an MBA, which by the way sucked, but nevertheless, I had to learn a lot of stuff through my own mistakes. And in this video, I'm gonna share my mistakes I had before getting to over 100,000 in net worth. And before we dive into the advice, I wanna talk a few disclaimers because I feel like somebody in the comments is gonna be like, "Arr." Every situation is unique, I get it. Where you live, I've lived in 10 countries, different laws and taxation laws. This video is very US centric. But when I lived in Switzerland, I had a very different taxation than when I lived in my native country of Finland or in the US. And I've lived in California, and now I live in Texas. So there are situations. So I've seen the highs and the lows, and I understand that your situations is unique. And in this video, I'm gonna make some generalization, but a lot of those generalizations are true for most people, hopefully also for you. And finally, these are my personal experiences and mistakes. This is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. I don't sell financial advice courses. I don't have financial gains here, but I'm also not an expert. So take it with a huge grain of salt. There's a saying that scared money doesn't make money, which I firmly do believe in. I think you should play more offense than defense, especially early on in your career as you're accumulating wealth. Simply put, wealth can be put into 3 buckets: accumulating it, maintaining it, and spending it. And they're totally different skill sets. Most people should just focus on gaining wealth and playing offense. Now, when I say that, a lot of people think, oh, I should invest in Bitcoin. I should go here. I should go there. If your net worth is less than $100,000, you should probably not be investing much. Just because it's right, it doesn't mean it's for you yet. And in this case, you should be making sure that you have an emergency fund of minimum 3 months, probably more like 6 months of your current expenses. What are your expenses? I don't know. You should check them out. And if you have a little bit of extra, you should probably invest in yourself in order to grow your income. So play offense. So investing in your personal growth and your skills and your career, and maybe even taking a lower paying job that will teach you skills that will eventually then give you a much higher paying job. So I think a lot of people get into the investment game way too early. It's like a shiny new object syndrome. I was guilty of this. I was worth barely 100,000 and I had like a private banker, because I knew someone, so I got into the bank early and I was really young, but it was really dumb. I was investing in like alternative assets with a net worth of 100K. It makes no sense. I should have just been doing ETFs. I would have way smaller management fees on those and I would have made more money. Do not start investing too early. Make sure you have an emergency fund and that you're investing in yourself and playing offense. Once you have more net worth and you are more further in your career, you should work with top level experts, and those will help you optimize your taxes. And particularly in the US, there's a lot of tax advice, and this is totally legally, by the way. There's also a lot of shady ways how you can avoid taxes, but I'm all for the legal ways avoiding taxes. And I don't think of it as a tax avoidance. I actually think of following the incentives the government put together. After living in multiple countries, some very high taxation, some very low taxation, I've learned that the tax code is just incentives what the government wants you to see. For example, they want you to see and own a home, and there are tax incentives for that. They want to see you to save for retirement, so there are tax incentives for that. They want you to invest in your healthcare, there's tax incentives for that. So just playing that incentive game makes sense. But if you are sub $100,000 in net worth, probably means your income is quite a bit less than that. And in that situation, you probably don't need anything fancy. You should probably just take the low-hanging fruit deductions, home offices, transportation, and just call it at that. And spend most of your time focusing on increasing your income versus becoming an expert in tax code or paying even like medium cost advisors for help. Just like you don't want to spend too much time on learning investing, which is another skill. You don't want to spend time on taxes because it's another skill, and you probably can't afford the real expert. So just kind of bare minimum deductions and then just focus on earning more. I mentioned the investing in yourself. One of the best ways to invest in yourself is to work even for free or for lower pay with people who can teach you skills. Work or intern for people that are really smart, even if that means temporarily taking less money. I think it's going to pay dividends later. A lot of advice you can find for free in YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, but a lot of stuff you also probably learn better in person from someone who can help you along the way. What makes this a little bit easier is that if you have any skill, even intermediate level skill of something that can help them. For example, if you have a camera and you're decent with camera, you could go and film these people and create them free content. So that would be one way. If you are great at sports or exercise and you give them a free personal trainer, and during those training sessions, you can soak in some of that knowledge, but you're 80-90% of the time there to get them in great shape. That would probably be of value. Or a massage therapist, I don't know what, great chef. And those are things where you can kind of get your foot in the door a little bit easier. One thing that a lot of people talk online that I actually do think is valuable for anybody with a net worth of under $100,000 is the credit card game. Now, there's a lot of videos about how to hack credit cards. What are the good credit cards? What are the bad credit cards? How to increase your credit? How to get incentives? You can like every 6 months to a year get a new credit card and play the game and get free miles and maybe a free trip. I actually do encourage this, not so much for people with more money. I think it's a distraction, but people with less money for fewer different reasons. One is that even though it takes time to learn that, it gives you a lot of fundamentals on how credit and debt works. And it also teaches you a lot about different incentives and structures. So it's kind of like a fairly low risk as long as you don't get into credit card debt. It's a low risk way of learning finance with some incentives for consumption. So by doing consumption, you can get a free trip every year to somewhere, which you probably couldn't afford otherwise. So that's a nice perk. But the biggest reason to work on the credit card game is improve your credit and to learn how debt works. And through that, you're not going to be paid by an employer, but the credit card companies are going to pay you for consumption, and you can use it for your advantage. Just like learning the credit card game, I think it's really helpful to audit yourself and have a budget and a tracker. Just like when you want to get in shape, people often underestimate how many calories they're eating. So a lot of health coaches the first thing they will say is like, hey, don't change anything, just track how much you're eating. And then people are surprised on what their calorie consumption is. Similarly with budget. So just tracking it is very helpful. I made another video about my New Year's resolutions and how I audit myself every year. And big part of that is looking at my financial statement. You can check that video. What is helpful is doing it once. You don't have to necessarily do this for the rest of your life. Some people do and they find it helpful, but just doing it for 1 to 3 months to see what's going on is very helpful to understand what the baseline is and increase your financial acumen. Some notable things that I think people shouldn't do if their net worth is under $100,000. One is 401k, with one exception. If you have an employer match, you should take that match. It's basically free money. And then you should probably convert it to a Roth, which is another story. But in general, like investing in your retirement, unless your net worth is at least over 100,000, just invest in yourself and growth and emergency fund. Sure, you might get some retirement savings along the way, but that shouldn't be your focus. It's, again, like your skills are either accumulating wealth, maintaining wealth, or spending wealth, and you're in the accumulation phase. And for that reason, retirement is a little bit like punting in football, and you should probably be throwing deep balls and running aggressively. Similarly with IRA and Roth IRA, now there are some tax reasons why that can make sense, but usually you got to earn a little more where it starts to be helpful, because you are kind of making the money slightly illiquid, not fully liquid, but there are penalties on pulling that funds away. And if your net worth is under 100,000, I would prefer you to be very liquid, very flexible, and very aggressive on increasing your wealth. So I generally wouldn't advise people to do IRA, Roth IRAs, and 401ks too early. They can be very helpful later on because of the tax incentives, but generally like people get into that too early, I find, and that hinders their growth and evolution. That's it. That's my advice for you if your net worth is under $100,000, anywhere from 0 to 100,000. What I would hope you to take away from this video is that even if it works, it might not be for you yet. Just know what level you're in and really double down on that phase and what's important in that phase. For you, it is make sure you're not in debt, you have an emergency fund, and you're investing in yourself and your career to grow, increase your income levels. The other stuff will come later. Secondly, like you should keep the main thing the main thing. If you have a domain expertise, being a videographer, an editor, a real estate broker, really focus on that and make that your main focus to increase your income until you're ready to expand. Kind of go an inch wide and a mile deep will probably be a better strategy on the accumulation of wealth versus when you're maintaining wealth, you kind of do the opposite. You kind of try to spread it thin and diversify, but try not to diversify early on. And finally, when in doubt, always invest in your value, not your assets. So if there's a chance between like spending time on optimizing your tax strategies versus your income and earnings, focus on the income and earnings first, and then you can later focus on stuff and tax savings later. You should never buy stuff that you don't need just because you could get a tax cut. So don't be that person who barely makes 100K and then they go and buy a G-Wagon because they get a tax write-off. Don't be that person, okay? This is a slightly new kind of video for me, so let me know in the comments what you think. If you hate it, you can leave a comment. I'm not gonna be offended. If you enjoy the content of the Spore, please hit a like and a subscribe and share with your friends. I appreciate your support, and I'll see you in the next video. Ciao, ciao.